I've always been drawn to the places on a map that have no names, the blank spots between the labeled peaks and the winding blue lines of rivers. To me, those aren't empty spaces, they're invitations. Last fall, I found an invitation I couldn't refuse. I'm a landscape photographer, and I'd heard whispers online and in old hiking forums about a place called the Serpents Tooth. It was supposedly a colossal, jagged spire of black rock deep within the Okanagan National Forest, a place so remote and difficult to access that only a handful of people had ever seen it, let alone photographed it. The challenge was intoxicating. I spent a week planning my route using satellite imagery and old topographical maps. It was a 3-day solo trip. One day to hike in, one day to shoot the tooth at dawn and dusk, and one day to hike out. I packed light but smart. A one-man tent, dehydrated meals, a water filter, and of course, my camera gear, and a satellite messenger, my one concession to my mother's worried pleas. The first day was exactly what I'd hoped for. The air was crisp, with the scent of pine and damp earth. The trail started clearly enough, but soon dissolved into a faint game trail, which I followed for hours, navigating by compass and GPS. The forest was ancient and dense. Sunlight struggled to pierce the canopy, dappling the mossy ground in shifting patterns of light and shadow. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of my boots on fallen leaves and the occasional call of a raven. By late afternoon, I found a perfect spot to make camp. A small, flat clearing by a gurgling creek, still a few miles from my final destination. As I set up my tent and filtered some water, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was it. True isolation. No people, no noise, no distractions, just me and the wilderness. I ate my dinner, a bland but satisfying pouch of chicken and rice, and watched as the sky bled from orange to a deep, star-dusted violet. I crawled into my sleeping bag feeling tired but accomplished, the gentle sound of the creek lulling me toward sleep. That's when I heard the first sound that was wrong. It was a whistle, a single, clear, melodic note that cut through the night. It wasn't a bird, not at this hour, and it wasn't the wind. It sounded intentional, human. I lay perfectly still, my ears straining against the silence that followed. My heart started a low, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I told myself it was my imagination, my city-dweller brain playing tricks on me in the unfamiliar quiet. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. Slowly, I convinced myself I had imagined it and finally drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, the sun was bright, and the weirdness of the night before felt distant and foolish. I packed up my camp, making sure to leave no trace, and continued my trek toward the Serpent's Tooth. The terrain grew steeper, more rugged. I had to scramble over fallen logs, slick with moss, and navigate through thickets of thorny brush. Around midday, I found something that stopped me cold. Nailed to a massive Douglas fir was a bone. It was a deer's femur, bleached white by the sun, but that wasn't the strange part. Tied around it, with what looked like sinew, were several dark feathers and a small twisted piece of rusted metal. It was an effigy, a marker of some kind. It felt old and deeply unsettling. This wasn't the work of a casual hiker. It felt territorial, a warning. For the first time, a sliver of genuine fear pierced my excitement. My brain screamed at me to turn back, that no photograph was worth this. But I was so close. I checked my satellite messenger, full signal. I reasoned that if anything happened, I could press the SOS button. I took a picture of the strange object on the tree and pushed on, the feeling of being watched now clinging to me like a shroud. I finally broke through the tree line in the late afternoon, and my breath caught in my throat. There it was, the Serpent's Tooth. It was more magnificent and menacing than I could have imagined. A shard of obsidian rock, hundreds of feet tall, clawing at the sky. It looked like a monument from a forgotten world. I spent the next hour scouting for the perfect composition. The unease from earlier slowly replaced by the familiar thrill of the chase for the perfect shot. I set up my tripod on a rocky outcrop overlooking a deep ravine with the tooth perfectly framed. This would be my spot for the night. As dusk began to settle, the forest went quiet again. The birds stopped singing. The wind died down. The silence this time felt heavy, expectant. I took a few test shots as the light softened, and then I heard it again. The whistle, the same single clear note from the night before, but closer this time. It seemed to come from the dark woods on the other side of the ravine. I froze, my hand hovering over my camera. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and thin in the vast emptiness. "Is anyone there?" The only answer was an echo, and then a new sound. It was the sound of a large rock scraping against another, a slow, deliberate scrape, followed by a heavy thud. It came from the same direction as the whistle. I grabbed my most powerful flashlight and aimed its beam across the ravine. The light cut a clean white cone through the darkness, illuminating a wall of ancient trees and tangled undergrowth. I swept the beam back and forth. Nothing, no shining eyes, no movement, just the unnerving stillness of the forest. I tried to focus on my photography, telling myself it was a rock slide, an animal, anything but a person. But my hands were trembling. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. The light was fading fast. I was working on a long exposure shot when I heard it again, and this time my blood ran cold. It was a voice. It whispered from the darkness across the ravine, a dry, rasping sound like dead leaves skittering across pavement. And it whispered my name, Ethan. It was impossible. No one knew I was here. No one. I hadn't said my name aloud once. I snatched my flashlight and blasted the beam across the chasm again, frantically searching the shadows. And for a split second, the beam caught it. It wasn't a man. It was tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. Its skin was the pale, mottled color of fungus. It was standing partially behind a tree, and it wasn't wearing clothes, but its form was indistinct, almost blurry, as if it were made of smoke and shadow. But the worst part, the image that is seared into my mind forever. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat, a choked, silent sob. The thing tilted its head, a slow, unnatural gesture. Then it took one step out from behind the tree, and it whistled. That single melodic note. It was a hunter's call. That broke the spell. I abandoned everything. My tripod, my camera bag, all of it. I scrambled backwards, grabbing only my flashlight and the satellite messenger I'd clipped to my belt. I turned and ran, plunging blindly back into the forest, away from the ravine. I didn't care about the trail. I just ran. Branches whipped at my face, thorns tore at my clothes. Behind me, I could hear it following. It wasn't running, it was just moving. There was no sound of heavy footsteps, just the eerie, rhythmic scraping of rock on rock, getting closer. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly. I risked a glance back and saw nothing but impenetrable darkness, but I could still hear it. Scrape, thud, and then the whisper, closer now, right behind me. Ethan. I fumbled with the satellite messenger, my fingers numb and clumsy. I found the SOS button and flipped the cover. I pressed it. A small red light began to blink. Help was coming, but help was hours away. I kept running. I don't know how long I ran for. It felt like an eternity. The scraping sound eventually faded, or maybe I just stopped hearing it over the frantic pounding of my own heart. I finally stumbled into the clearing where I had camped the first night. I collapsed by the creek, sobbing and gasping for air. I stayed there, huddled in the dark, until the first gray light of dawn touched the sky. A search and rescue team found me a few hours later, just after sunrise. I was babbling, incoherent with fear and exhaustion, talking about a blank-faced man and a whistle. They chalked it up to hypothermia and panic. They helped me find my way back to my abandoned gear near the ravine. Everything was there, untouched. My camera was still on the tripod, aimed at the Serpent's Tooth. Back in civilization, I tried to forget. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination. But a week later, I finally built up the courage to look at the photos from that night. I loaded the memory card into my computer and clicked through the images. There were the test shots. And then, the last one, the long exposure. The Serpent's Tooth was silhouetted against a deep purple sky. The image was crisp and beautiful, but as I zoomed in on the dark ravine in the foreground, my heart stopped. Standing in the exact spot where I had seen it, partially obscured by the shadows, was the figure. In the long exposure, its form was blurred, ethereal, but you could see the unnaturally long limbs. It was looking directly at the camera. It was looking directly at me. I haven't been back to the woods since. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I think I hear it. A single, soft whistle, carried on the wind. And I wonder if the thing from that nameless place on the map ever truly let me leave.